Hey everybody, I'm here live today with Turner Bitton, who is the chair of the Glendale Community Council. Glendale is one of the two neighborhoods that abut our proposed site over on the west side for the Other Side Village. So we have Turner on today to talk a little bit about his background and why he's become supportive of the project in his neighborhood. So Turner, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's just start out with a little bit about you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and where you invest your time, both professionally and in the neighborhood of Glendale?
Yeah, so I'm a transplant in Glendale. I grew up in Ogden and moved down here in 2018. And I deliberately picked Glendale because it reminds me of Ogden so much. I loved Ogden. I love Glendale. My day job, I work as the development director at Heal Utah, which is an amazing organization
Wonderful
that works
organization.
on clean air, climate change, radioactive waste, and clean air. And then in my personal time, pickleball is probably the thing that I spend the most time doing, other than just being at home with my dogs and husband.
Awesome. Awesome. So pivoting to the Other Side Village, tell us kind of about how you got to know the project and how you're feeling about it today.
Yeah, so I first heard about the project. I actually think when you guys reached out to me, you guys reached out very, very early on in the process. I think a couple of years ago, even, and was excited from the beginning, and just think that the project is such a new and refreshing way to look at the way that we addressed homelessness. And yeah, I think that answers that question.
I think it does. Yeah. Yeah. And so getting a little more specific on the neighborhood over there, obviously, you're a representative, but there's a lot of different thoughts. We've had conversations with a lot of neighbors and we did this canvas of both Poplar Grove and Glendale and found that about 6-to-1 ratio, neighbors became supportive after our outreach and believed in the project. But those are just numbers. And obviously we still have neighbors who have concerns and questions and who are giving us input. So what are you actually hearing on the ground from your neighbors?
Well, what you just said really mirrors what I hear. The overwhelming majority of folks that I talk to are excited about the project and supportive of the project.
Awesome.
There are concerns there and folks that are concerned about different things. But what I found is when you sit down and you talk about the project, you talk about the unique way that the village will be structured in terms of the expectations for folks who are going to be living there, and the social supports that the village will provide. I think a lot of those concerns can be mitigated as soon as folks hear about the details of how the village will be. I've said this multiple times when I've been asked about it, but when we're talking about this type of project, we're talking about permanent supportive housing. This is not an overnight shelter. It's not a temporary space. It's a place where people are coming to join a community for the long term. And in situations like that and in organizations like that, we see a much better success rate in terms of mitigating things like drug usage or some of the other impacts that I hear about the dispersed camps that are throughout parks and public places in Glendale.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's such an important point is, we had this reasonable concern around what happened with the shelters and some of the difficulty with having shelters located in neighborhoods. That makes sense. There was a lot of mess around that, but it's so important to differentiate that this is not that at all. This is an asset. So then big picture, last question for you. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what do you hope that the village is doing for the neighborhood of Glendale?
I think the biggest thing that I'd love to see is new commercial development opportunities. I'm very excited about the prospect of a grocery store, a restaurant, really anything that can come to the western edge of the neighborhood, because our neighborhood is hungry for, I guess, self-grown commercial development opportunities. So I constantly hear about the need for a coffee shop and new restaurants and grocery stores. And the other thing that I hope is that we have, as neighbors, that we've stepped up and really welcomed the residents of the village. So my 3-year goal is that they're at community council meetings, and that we've elected
Yes.
a resident of the village to our board, and that we have really good representation of all the people who are living there, and of the community at large.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, obviously, one of our primary goals for the village is that relationship between the city, Glendale and Poplar Grove, and the village itself. It really will only succeed if we have that kind of intertwined relationship. And I hadn't even thought about one of our residents running for the community council board. That would be pretty special. So,
Mhm.
well, Turner, thank you so much for your time and for your support and for your accountability. I think our project has benefited greatly from the input that you've given us. So, thank you for all of that.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the time this morning.
Yeah, absolutely.